Hi everybody. I had an idea for a video when a video recommendation came to me on YouTube about using first principles thinking and how if you have, big problems or issues, you should be using first principles thinking. So that got me thinking, what kind of thinking do I use or what kind of thinking did I use to invest in Tesla, and what do I use to continue having conviction and staying in the stock, even with all the volatility over the last several years. So first, let me share a couple things that I don't use, and I didn't use back in 2014 when I bought my first shares. One of them is first principles thinking. It's kind of hilarious, but I'm not breaking anything down into its smallest parts. I don't have time for that, and I'm probably not smart enough to use first principles thinking in my investing. I also come from a culture where it's pretty normal for people to have apprenticeships and to learn based on how they've done things throughout history, and to learn that very, very deeply. And then, the person can make tweaks later, and that leads to very successful craftspeople, right? That later in life. So no, I'm not using first principles thinking. A second thing I'm not doing, I've heard a lot of investing channels over the last several years say, do your own analysis, learn how to read a spreadsheet. I don't do any of that. I think I've read one spreadsheet in my life, and I think I had kind of an allergic reaction to it. So I'm not reading spreadsheets. By the way, none of this is investment advice. You do what you think is best, of course. So what do I do, right? So back in 2014, what did I do? Well, number one is I've always been a big reader. So I did a lot of reading, and I've read about investing and investors and, different forms of investment, and, those who've been successful and those who've made very bad mistakes. And then, of course, I also read a lot about Tesla and Elon Musk. And then what I would do is, so one, I would probably say I use some form of analogous reasoning, right? Something that seems to not have the day right now, when first principles, it's all about first principles thinking. By the way, I have to say, I know that Elon Musk came out and talked about first principles thinking, and it was totally fascinating. It's great. And then all these other influencers come out, and then they made videos on how you should be using first principles thinking. I'm like, I think there's irony there. So anyway, just a thought. So back to what I was saying. So I think I'm using analogous reasoning, basically looking out at history and other things. I look at other types of technologies, and how I heard one where it's like, wow, it's like if you had imagined at the beginning, when the Wright brothers made the first got the first airplanes off the ground, that there'd be a 747 in a few decades. So I'm like, wow, so where could this be in the future, right? So I'm basically making an analogy there, and also seeing how timelines are really compressed now with the technology today. So one is analogous thinking, and number two is, I think I've always been good with imagination, right? So I'm kind of a creative person, and I love thinking like 5, 10, 15 years. What are things going to be like 30 years? I love sci-fi movies. And hopefully I'm not making investment decisions based on science fiction movies, but I know to sleep on things and to take walks. So after reading and absorbing, take walks, I think about, what do I think things are going to be like in 10, 15 years? And when I drove in the Tesla, when I drove in that test drive in the Tesla, I really slept on it and thought about it and decided, yeah, wow, if they have sensors around the cars, or cameras in the cars, and they're really thinking in the future here, and this car is already following the car behind it automatically, which is kind of a mind-blowing thing back at that time, then I think, what are things going to be like in 10, 15 years? I use my imagination, and I make sure to sleep on it and sleep on it again and be patient, and then I make my decision. So Analogous reasoning, imagination, and then I'd say there's a third one that I've used in the last few years since I didn't really consume. I didn't consume YouTube at all for Tesla up until the pandemic, really. So at the pandemic, so my career has always been more people oriented and in uh, really a lot of it judging people of all levels, and you know taking the good, taking the bad, if you will. I've managed teams. So I do pride myself on being a pretty good people reader. So I watch a lot of the channels. I watch the people who seem to be yelling at the camera, and people who are a little bit more analytical. And then again, I think about it. I use my own sense of judgment. And again, I'm not doing any analysis on the P&Ls of Tesla, but what I am doing is I'm listening to people analyze or talk about their analysis of conference calls and things like that. And then I sleep on it and I think about it. And then again, I'll make a decision, or in these cases, make no decision here, right? And just continue holding the stock until my conviction changes, which doesn't seem to be anytime soon. So once again, the three things I think I use are analogous reasoning, imagination, and judgment of people that I listen to. The two that I don't do, or I don't do my own analysis, and I don't use first principles thinking. The two that seem to be having its day in all the channels and what we should be doing. Yeah, feel free, comment below. Hope this was kind of fun, and looking forward to the next video.